Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to another edition of the KSL.com Game Center podcast. It's Friday, January 19th. We are here on a Utah women's basketball game day here in Salt Lake City, joined by Josh Furlong. How you doing today, Josh?
Doing well. How are you, Caleb?
Doing okay. The snow has mostly dissipated. We got clear roads. So I'm feeling good. The snow is staying in the mountains where it belongs, not down here on the streets. So
Exactly. That's my
yeah,
philosophy.
yeah, exactly. And yeah, it's a big weekend for the 20th ranked Utah women's basketball team. They welcome USC, ranked sixth tonight, and then don't play till Monday again. But on Monday they'll take on number five UCLA, also here in Salt Lake. So huge weekend, huge 3, 4 days for this Utes women's team. I think this is the first time we've got a chance to talk about them this year on this podcast. Obviously, we talked about them a lot last year. They had great success. Returned almost the entire team. Alissa Pili is back playing really well in her fifth college year. But they did have a major injury, losing Gianna Neepkins. And so I'm just kind of curious if, from your perspective, as someone who's been watching this team consistently, where are they kind of at, and how does it compare to last year this time, I guess?
Yeah, last year they were, record-wise, they were doing far better. They were on a run, they weren't losing many games at all. They were winning the 50-50 games in conference play, which is what you need to do, obviously. Right now, they're still kind of trying to figure themselves out. The Gianna Neepkins injury was a massive injury for the team. Alissa Pili is the reigning Pac-12 Player of the Year, and she's their, leading scorer. But Gianna Neepkins was always the one that was kind of the secondary, create your own shot type of player that just really changes the dynamic on the floor. So, if she's getting her shot, that works. But then she's also able to facilitate and get pass the ball around the horn and be able to get it to other players to facilitate 3 pointers or whatever that may be. So when she went out, it's kind of taken a toll on this team and trying to figure out how they need to manage things. And so they're still trying to find some women that are going to step up and kind of create their own shots and take it to that next level outside of Alissa Pili because they're going to key in on her and they do every single time. And it's been difficult for them and they've had a couple of games back to back that they got a little bit screwed over by the refs. I'm not one to kind of play into the refs narrative, but it was interesting to watch how those two games against Arizona and then Stanford played out. There were things obviously Utah could do better, especially in the Stanford game. Arizona they could as well, but it's interesting to kind of see how sometimes the refs do play a role in the end of the game situations, and that really kind of fired up Utah and galvanized them a little bit, and they came out and destroyed California the next time. So they're kind of this hot and cold team right now, still trying to figure out where they're at. But overall, they're still a really quality team. Like you said, they're ranked 20th in the country. They're a good team. They're just still they're not as dynamic as what they were last year, I'll say.
Yeah, it's been kind of interesting to see. They start out as like a top five team potentially in the nation, right? And then kind of this slow, I don't want to say like a drop. I mean, obviously, yes, they did drop in the rankings. But they just kind of taken these hits, like you mentioned. They lose those Arizona and Stanford games by combined 3 points, which is a tough thing to have happen. But then you come back and you drop 93 on California, which anytime you're approaching 100 points in the college game, especially on the women's side, it's something certainly to be proud of. And then you mentioned Alyssa Peely. I mean, from my perspective, it kind of feels like she's going to go down as like just one of the greats in Utah basketball. I mean, they went to
Mm,
Anchorage and like played in like a special game for her, which reminded me a lot of when BYU went to Glen Falls and played like the Jimmer game in New York. Kind of
that's
a
right.
similar thing. Like she's just kind of like this untouchable like icon within this program now. And tonight she gets to go against her former team, USC. So I don't know, like how is she kind of gonna be remembered here at Utah maybe, and like what more can she even do to cement her status as like potentially, I don't want to say the GOAT, but like the GOAT.
Yeah, I mean, I think she's definitely in that conversation. I'm trying to remember what day that was. The last game that they played, Stanford, that was Sunday. No, yeah, California,
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
Sunday. My days are all mixed up now. Anyways, in that game, she crossed the 1,000 point
Yeah.
benchmark. That was just a Utah benchmark. That's not her career. That she's obviously got more than that. She's the fastest player to ever do that at Utah in 43 games, which is pretty remarkable. So I think, it's easy in this generation to call everybody the GOAT, right? And I think recency bias is a huge thing. But at the same time, I think what Alissa Pili has been able to do is generational, right? Like I think she doesn't come along very often, and the fact that you're able to get her and have her doing so well says a lot about what Utah is able to be and who they are right now. So I mean, I think she still has things to prove, right? Like she still has things to grow into. I think more importantly, though, it's the offense in particular needs to kind of find a way to help facilitate her and spread the floor a little bit so that they're not always doing double or triple team coverage against her. That's still going to happen, but they need to find a way to be able to relax it a little bit so that she can work. She's taken a beating the last few games just because teams know that if they can stop Alissa, they can stop pretty much most of Utah's offense. And it's not quite that simple, as you mentioned, 93 points. That clearly wasn't just Alissa. But I think she's proven to take it to a next level this season. She's still got a lot more that she can do, but I think at the end of the day, she doesn't care about her records or how she's going to be perceived here at Utah. They want to be able to get further in the NCAA tournament, right? Last year they got to the Sweet 16, lost to the reigning champions, LSU. They want to go further into the tournament, and so I think that's where they're focused. But I still think if you're looking at it from that perspective, she's still going to go down as one of the greatest, if not the greatest of all time at Utah.
Yeah, so kind of talking about, who else needs to step up a little bit looking forward. As you mentioned, their goal is the NCAA tournament. And as much as we mentioned like these losses that they've had and they've dropped in the rankings, they're still projected to be a 5 seed in the latest bracketology. So like they're gonna be in the tournament, they're gonna be a force. And like depending on where they fall in those seeds, like they could get a pretty favorable matchup if depending on kind of where they are. And so that'll be interesting. But just looking at who else has kind of had to step up, you look at in this most recent game, Ines Vieira had 19 points. She kind of at that point guard position doing pretty well. And then someone who I was looking at these stats, a freshman, Reese Ross. I'm not as familiar with her, but she had 10 rebounds against Cal. So, who are some of these more like younger underclassmen who are making an impact on this team?
Yeah, Reese is definitely one of those that's going to be a future star for Utah. I mean, I think she can play anywhere down at the five. She can play at the one. She spent a lot of her career as a guard, but Lynn Roberts switched her more into a post type player. And part of that was just because she loves to rebound. And if you're going to rebound, you're going to play. That's what Lynn says. So I think she's going to be somebody to focus on. She's still kind of coming into her own, right? Like she's got a great story, and I'm excited to tell that story someday. I still have the interview I need to write about, but she's got a great story. But Utah's also got Maddie Wilkie. She's not necessarily the youngest player on the team, but she's a transfer player. She's kind of starting to hit her stride with Utah and trying to really kind of understand her role, and you're starting to see her come alive a little bit. If she can get it going, she's dangerous behind the 3 point range, right? Like I think she does well. Anesh Vieira, she's a veteran player for this team, right? And she's kind of had a varying roles in this team. She's at times been behind Izzy Palmer, who has been out for most of the season due to an injury, and it's been tough for her. And Lynn Roberts says they're hopeful to get her back this week. That would be huge news for Utah if they could get that just to add to the guard line and just give Utah another dominant player that is not quite Gianna Neepkins, but more along that line, somebody that can create their own shot. But you're seeing Anesh really just kind of take it on herself. Like she's that pesky defender that you just do not want to go against if you're playing basketball. Anybody that's played basketball hates it when they have that pesky defender and they just don't give them any room. That's who she is. Against California, she took it to another level. Honestly, she had 4 steals and all of them turned into transition layups. She was just doing incredible things, finding ways to be able to impact the team. So I think with those three in particular, they're kind of taking that next level, and they're kind of being asked to step in. One other name, and it's not a new name for people. It's Kennedy McQueen. She's from Utah, and she's had a lot of success there. She's kind of being forced into taking on that role, the Gianna Neepkins role, somebody who needs to create their own shot. She's getting the number one defender outside of Alissa Pili, right, in terms of guard play. So I think they've got some talent, they've got some ability there. It's more just kind of still trying to figure out how how they all work together in a way that kind of works in similarities to what they had when Gianna was there.
Yeah, it's so fascinating because like as dominant of a player as Alyssa Pili can be, this really is a team that like everyone knows their role, and it does work as like this finely tuned machine where like everybody contributes. And so I think when someone like Neepkins goes out, okay, that's a key cog in like this, like starting five, right? That it just kind of messes everything up because each role is so important. So yeah, I think like you mentioned, like finding who fills that specific role, whether it's McQueen, whether it's Vieira, whether it's somebody else, right? I think that could obviously be huge because you can't have Peely going for 40 every night, right? Like it's just not how this team works, and it's not super sustainable probably from a college standpoint. Looking forward to tonight specifically against USC, 7 p.m. Here in Salt Lake. The Utes are actually favored by 6.5, which I thought was interesting. Maybe given a little bit of that home cooking, a little bit of that home court advantage. What have you seen so far from the home court, the fans coming in, and kind of like maybe like what's your message to get some people out there tonight to go to the Huntsman?
Yeah, I mean, this season. There's been a lot more fan support for the team, and so I think it's been a good atmosphere. The beneficial thing about women's basketball games is all of their seats are GA, so you can
Mm.
come in, you can sit, close to the floor. A lot of the times they have autograph sessions, so you can come in and meet the players, kind of chat with them after the game on the court. It's a fun environment where you get to be able to be a part of the action as much as possible. Women's basketball, especially when they make threes, they throw t-shirts out to the crowd. So they do a really good job of trying to get the crowd into it. The crowd's done a really good job of being able to get into the game and help them. It's been a good atmosphere for Utah at home. I mean, and this isn't a place that Utah loses much at all. I think Stanford is actually the first time they've lost in the Huntsman Center in maybe 2 years. I think they were undefeated at home last year, if I remember right. So that one was hard, right? Like you're playing against a tough team and you lose that one closely. So they're tough at home. They're going up against a formidable USC team tonight. Juju Watkins, that's a freshman phenom. She's incredible, right? As much as Alissa Pili is dynamic for Utah, that's what Juju Watkins is for USC. So it'll be a fun matchup. I mean, if you're not excited about seeing quality basketball, I don't know what to tell you, right? Like this is where it's at, and it's a fun game. It is different from the men's if you're familiar more with the men's. I tend to call it more of a finesse game, but even then, it's not quite that. There's a lot of pushing the tempo. There's a lot of shooting. It's fun. Like some of the women's games are probably some of my favorite games to go to.
Yeah, and like you said, if you're one of those that feels like you never get the T-shirt at these sporting events, if you want a good
Yeah.
chance at a T-shirt, go to the women's game. They give out a ton, and then you probably don't have as much competition. People trying to grab it from you. So go out to the Huntsman, get a T-shirt, get an autograph, support this top 20 women's basketball team. Like we have one of the best women's basketball teams in the nation right here in Salt Lake. So go check them out. We've got great matchups tonight and then Monday, USC, UCLA. So let's show them what it's all about, right? But yeah, appreciate you coming on, Josh, and we'll catch you guys next time on the KSL.com Game Center podcast.